Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is an illusion and those you love will be the first to go missing. It's available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews and even loved and enjoys by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassidy, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for Goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com on over 40 podcast platforms, heard in over 100 countries, including Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also, Anchor FM, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Audible, Apple Music, and also heard on HamiltonRadio.net, Diamonds FM, Oldies Radio, and a few networks coming soon. Take the Mike Wagner Show on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok today. And for great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com and check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies, and baseball gear makes great gifts 24/7. Go to Amazon.com and check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia for great books like Missing, Once, and Wrinkles. Also T-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, phone cases, and more. Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Check it out today. Also support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, themikewagnershow.com. You can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com at the Mike Wagner Show. Make sure you do so today. We're here with a terrific lady who was born and raised in New York City, and she's a psychiatrist for 30 years, conducting groundbreaking research on brain imaging on psychopaths. She spent 9 years confronting German bureaucrats who buried her case at the bottom of the pile and told her family would probably be dead by the time she won, and ordered to split the proceeds with a Nazi business, and discovered the building to be used as making Nazi flags. We'll talk about that. And she has a new book out, which is a memoir called Summoned to Berlin, and described challenges she faced, which overcame during a long decade search for restitution and at a particular place, and from her family, from the Nazis as well. So she tells an amazing story about that. Live, ladies and gentlemen, from the Plus Studios in beautiful downtown New York City, the amazing, multi-talented psychiatrist of 30 years and author of Summoned to Berlin, a memoir. Ladies and gentlemen, we got the very multi-talented and author, Dr. Joanne Intrator. Dr. Joanne, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm thrilled to be with you. I think it's a great honor to be with you. I've watched your show, and I'm very happy that I'm participating in it right now.
Well, it's great to have you on board as well, too, Joanne. And of course, reading about your amazing memoir called Summoned to Berlin. You spent 9 years confronting German bureaucrats who buried your case at the bottom of the pile, and basically told your fam you'll probably be dead by the time you won the case. And we'll have you talk about that. You were born and raised in New York City, psychiatrist for 30 years, conducting groundbreaking research into brain imaging and psychopaths. And before getting to all that, Dr. Joanne, tell us how you first got started.
This all got started very sadly at the deathbed of my father in 1993. It was in Palm Beach, Florida. And I thought he had already gone into a coma, and he sits up and looks completely alert and much younger than I had seen him look in years. And he looks at me and says, "Are you tough enough yet? And do they know who you are?" And then he lies back down and he passes away within a day.
Wow.
These were the last words my father spoke to me. And basically, he was setting before me the challenge of this restitution case that he had found out about a year before in Berlin. The reason he found out about it a year before was that the Berlin Wall had fallen, and all this property in the historic center of Berlin, which was not in West Berlin, it was in East Berlin behind the Iron Curtain, now became available, and a very large manufacturing building in what's called Berlin Mitte, the middle of Berlin, became available because my grandfather, his father's name, was found on what's called the Grundbuch, which is the history of the ownership of the building. And what it said was that he owned the building from, I don't know, maybe 1925, maybe even earlier than that, to 1938, when he lost the building in what was called a forced auction, which meant he couldn't pay the mortgage to hold the building on. That was 5 years into the Nazi regime when he lost the building. So I knew that I had quite a challenge ahead of me. I knew that I was going to do this for him. And I knew he was saying to me that he wanted me to be tough enough to do it, because he knows that I approached a lot of things in my life with a lot of anxiety, but I ultimately get things done. Essentially, a couple months later, I go to Berlin and I meet the lawyer that had presented the case to him before he had died. And I find out that there is an obstacle, which is that the descendant of the family of the business that got the property in 1938 was challenging my family's right to restitution. And basically they were saying, I guess through their lawyer, that my grandfather lost the building in 1938, September of 38, because he was an incompetent businessman. This was an incredibly awful thing to hear. It was a real slur, and it was absolutely absurd because it was 5 years into the regime. And that meant my grandfather had been broken with all his businesses, with all his money. And at that point, he had no way of getting out of Germany. So I almost didn't take it seriously, like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But I find out from my German lawyer that it has to be taken seriously. And my German lawyer made a recommendation. He said, if you join up with these people, now I didn't know who these people were. I had no idea what they did. I didn't know where they were from, what kind of work they were in. I knew, basically the lawyer said, if you join up with them, you're going to make it through the bureaucracy of the German courts much quicker, because there are thousands of cases of restitution cases facing us in Berlin, and there's not very much staff. So he was encouraging me, you joint venture with them. It's like splitting a cake. You want a piece of cake? Well, we'll split it.
Interesting. If that's the case, I'll take some chocolate. Thank you.
Exactly. But just like you're laughing, I was like, this is ridiculous. This is no day, this is a day at the beach for me. I knew that this was about anti-Semitism. These people were saying he lost it not because he was a Jew, but because he was a lousy businessman. I knew that that wasn't true. However, as the lawyer said, East Berlin was overwhelmed with these cases, and to sort of make his point even stronger, he said, if you don't do it, you probably will win the case, but they'll go after you in an appeals court, and that's going to be awfully expensive. And by the time that's resolved, most of your family will be dead.
Oh, that is like a slap in the face. When I read that, I'm like, oh my gosh.
It really was a cruel thing to say. Very, very cruel. But it didn't quite hit me the way it hit me over a period of time. I didn't really get a sense of the flavor of this case because here I was in Germany, and Germany was very scary for me. My parents were refugees from the Nazis. The whole German language was overwhelming to me. It sounded very harsh. So I was somewhat afraid. So here was this very educated, very erudite lawyer, and this is what he said. However, that did not mean that I was going to go along with him. I said, no, my family, and that consisted of my brother and my uncle, who was my father's older brother, who was in his 90s at the time. We decided, of course, we're not going to joint venture this deal. We're going to go through with this. And of course, I'm living in New York City, I'm a mother of a small child, a wife, and I've got a major research project going at the Veterans Administration Hospital and Mount Sinai School of Medicine. And so I'm not going to be able to stay there and do all this. So this was a back and forth thing, and very slow. He was very right. It was a very, very slow process. And because there was a fight brewing between myself and this other claimant, we were placed on the bottom of the pile.
How so? It's like, what was their criteria on placing where on the pile? Like, top, middle, bottom. What was their criteria?
The criteria was easiness. The top was, this is straightforward. We can do it. This is a bunch of garbage. We're throwing it out. It went like that. And so I was told that the case was that complicated, and they had 5 people working on it. There were just, it wasn't, they didn't have enough people working on these cases. And that to me was also very disturbing, because all of East Berlin, when the wall came down, was one of the largest real estate packages in the entire world. So there were thousands of restitution cases, not just Jews, but other people as well, that had lost property as a result of World War II. So I didn't give it my full attention. I had my life to do, but I went back again. And on my second trip, which was, I don't know, this probably in 95, I'm at a meeting, I'm exhausted. I'm always overwhelmed by jet lag for every trip that I go. Again, he's trying to convince me to joint venture. And I said, no, sir, I'm not going to do it. And then kind of just as the meeting was breaking up, he said, there's a rumor that the Nazi flag was produced in the building.
Yes, I read about that. I was just going to transition to it, but keep going though.
Yeah, and I said, the Nazi flag, well, that's it. They've got to be Nazis. Who gets to do a building in 1938 unless you're connected to the Nazis? Oh no, Frau Intrator is how he called me. We can't find that information out. So I, again, was sort of overwhelmed, and whatever, I didn't know if you could find this information out. I assumed he was correct. This went on for quite a bit. There were 2 or 3 trips, and at one point the lawyer invited me to meet the judges involved in the case, because we were now 3 or 4 years into this thing. As I said, I have a whole other life in New York, and he said, we want you to meet the judge, maybe if they meet you personally. So I went to Berlitz, because I knew quite a bit of German, and I tuned up at Berlitz. I took like all-day courses for about 2 or 3 weeks, so that I could be in the meeting, because these people did not speak English. The West German lawyers spoke English, but the people in the East did not. So I went to the meeting, and at the meeting, one of the judges says to me, your father, he says he parrots the same thing. He was not a good businessman. And I looked at him and I said, how dare you speak about my father that way? I'm good. And I went into my purse, and I had a camera in my purse, and I had it all loaded up. I didn't know why I brought my camera. I was kind of like in this altered state, and I stood up and took pictures of the lawyers. And I said, I'm going to take these pictures and show my relatives in the United States what you look like.
Wow.
And everybody went crazy. I'm crying, tears are running down my eyes. And everybody tried to settle me down. The chief judge brings me like a vitamin C candy, as if that's going to.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. And then she looks at me. She was the chief. There were 3 judges. She said, I'm going to put your case on the top of the file.
Amazing.
Like yeah. So I left that meeting. My lawyers were very proud of me that I had done this, as if I had planned this. It was all intuitive. It was just like amazing that this all happened. And so I thought we were on our way, and we were not on our way. I find out Now, not only do my lawyers want me to negotiate, this judge wants me to negotiate. She will rightly call the building our building, but we have to get rid of these opponents. We have to pay them off. And
Really?
these opponents wanted between 30 and 50%, whatever the value of the building was. Now, Mike, I got to tell you something interesting. My percentage of this building was 3.15%, which is very, very little. And what was happening, the more I was being pushed, into things that I didn't want to do, which I didn't wind up doing, the more I didn't care about that 3.15% because there was not much to care about. All I wanted to know was what happened in 1938. What was the circumstances? Who were these people? And I wound up hiring an investigator.
Okay. Now, just a couple of things that just popped in my head as well, too, that, back in 1938, when the Nazis took over, what was being manufactured in the building before the takeover?
Clothing, textiles, hats. It was like in the garment district, the way it was here in New York and the way it probably is in Chicago, clothing, men, women. There were numbers of people that had rented space in the building. And when I hire the detective, I find out what happened to the different people that had space in the building before this auction occurred and then after this auction occurred. And what he tells me is that the person that was opposing me was the descendant of a business that was sitting in the building since 1931.
Wow.
And they were sitting there, this company that was opposing our restitution was sitting there and waiting. They knew after 1933, you didn't have to pay a Jewish landlord. You had everything in your favor. You could be in a building like that rent-free. This was an enormous building, like the length of a New York City block. That's how long it was, with enormous numbers of different kinds of manufacturing going on in there. My detective showed me a sheet of paper of all the Jewish-owned businesses that left at the time of that forced auction, and what was left. And what was left was this descendant who was challenging us and a flag company. And the flag company took over the entire building and made the Nazi flag. They had already Nazi flag and all the paraphernalia that goes along, the bunting and all the things you see along a parade. But what I found out, which was absolutely heart-shattering for me, was that they in September of 1941, this company, the flag company, got the order to make 1 million Jewish stars that would be sewn on the Jews that were left in Germany to identify them to ultimately be sent east. Being sent east is a euphemism for getting murdered.
The Holocaust, yes.
Exactly, Mike. And
wow,
that broke my heart that I heard this. I couldn't believe that this occurred in the building and that this is what I found out. And I suspect was known by the judge and might have been known by the lawyer. I don't know. I can't pretend to know what was in anybody's mind. But what happened is, this is now, I find this out 9 years into this. There are lots of details to the story that are interesting and will be in my book. And I can't wait to send you the book and you'll see for yourself. And maybe we'll get to talk again. But it sort of broke my heart to find out that these Jewish stars were made in the family building.
It is certainly sad. And of course, just a few more we'll talk about in the book as well, too. I've got a couple of questions and we'll get into your profession, too, about, working as a psychiatrist for 30 years, doing some research on brain imaging and psychopaths. We'll talk about just a minute. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition rate. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those you love will be the first to go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews in Eve 11 enjoys by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassie, Forbes Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for it goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com on over 40 podcast platforms. Heard in over 100 countries, also on HamiltonRadio.net, Diamonds FM, Oldies Radio, and a few networks coming soon. Take us with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok today. For great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com and check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia for great books, merchandise, and more. I'll support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com at the Mike Wagner Show. Make sure you do so today. We're here with the author of the book, Summoned to Berlin, a memoir by Dr. Joanne Intrator here on the Mike Wagner Show. And of course, you spent 9 years confronting German bureaucrats about the case, and you got to top as well. And some thoughts that came to my mind as well, too, when you talk about the building. And when the building was first put up, it was basically his building. And of course, what happened after the war ended? What was it? Was it still being occupied, making flags, or what was it being used afterwards?
Well, the building was bombed, and there's some dramatic pictures that showed what happened to it. It wasn't bombed to smithereens. It was rebuilt by the East Germans, and it's really a stunning looking building. It served the purposes of the East German government and had different businesses that the East German government needed because it was very large and commodious. So when I got to see it, I mean, there was no evidence of it being bombed. When I went there the first time, it had been emptied out because the wall had come down and it was going to become a restitution case.
Okay. And also too, with the building as well, too, that, it was separated between East Germany and West Germany and everything else. In terms of laws and regulations, it seemed like that East Germany, had like a different type of bureaucracy. Was it more difficult? Was it just the same? Or was it like, in a sense, easier than West Germany? I mean, what degree of difficulty was it with East Germany compared to West Germany at the time?
I would imagine had the building been in West Germany, if it had been in West Germany, it would have been dealt with after the war in the 1950s and 1960s, as other properties of my grandfather wound up taken care of. And that's a whole other story. But the bureaucracy was such in East Germany that it came after the Nazi bureaucracy. In other words, there was no period of time where any of these people had lived in a democracy. So the bureaucracy was essentially much worse.
Okay.
And, and not dissimilar to kind of the authoritarian nature that one saw as the Nazi regime was building itself.
Okay. And then in terms of the building as well, too, that you're talking like, 30-50% and everything. And you're supposedly getting like 3.15. And I'm just getting these figures correct and everything else. What's the current value of the building today? And how much would you have gotten out of it based on the figures? Like, supposedly you got 3.15, but you only like 30-50%. What was the value of the building and how much you would have gotten?
Right now, Berlin has really come back, I would imagine I would have gotten $1 million or so if we did this now. When the building first became, my father first became aware of it, the building itself was considered to be, maybe 15, $20 million in American dollars and larger in German marks. So my father would have gotten 6.5%, and his brother got 6.5. There were other family members. My grandfather was in partnership with another part of our family, and they had a much larger percentage than we did. I was into this because I'd been studying German history before I became a doctor. I was interested in why people become Nazis, how that happened. So I was set up to go and take this project on. So in the beginning, it looked like, all right, maybe I'll get something from my son Benjamin's college fund. And then who cared? I didn't care. All I wanted to know was what the story was. And so at the end of 2001, when this happened, actually, we finally signed everything up in March of 2001. I got about $90,000, which basically may have paid for all my trips back and forth, hiring the investigator. It meant nothing to me financially. It was all about honoring my father and honoring my family's reputation and finding the truth. The truth to me was invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
That my
And certainly invaluable indeed as well too. And I thought about the $90,000 nowadays. It just covers like gas expenses the way gas is going these days. So
forget about it. Oh my God. Yeah. All over the world, we're in trouble. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
of course you'll also be a doctor as well too, transforming that. You talk about in the life of Nazis and everything. You've been a psychiatrist for 30 years, conducting groundbreaking research and brain imaging on psychopaths. And tell us about the research and what inspired you to become a psychiatrist.
Well, I think all along I was very curious about, my father was very sick when I was young, and doctors played a very big role in getting him well. So as a little girl, I always wanted to be a doctor, but it was the 1950s. You're supposed to get an MRS, not an MD, so I sort of didn't have the nerve or the guts to go through with it, so I waited until I was in my 20s and I finished college, and I went back to school, and I took all the science and math courses that I was afraid to take when I actually went to college, but I got into my number one choice, which was Columbia University. And I knew I was going to be a psychiatrist because of my interest in emotions and how emotions affect people's lives. And I also was interested in the bad guys in general. Why do people do bad things? So it wound up that I ran for a short period of time, a criminal court clinic in the Bronx. And I was wondering, how does one figure out if a person's really a bad guy? They're not crazy by, social standards or considered insane by legal standards. They talk like ordinary people. So how do I figure this out? What happened is I came across a guy in Canada, in Vancouver, Dr. Robert Hare, who was the world's expert at the time. And he was doing a lot of research on particularly language, that he had discovered that psychopaths talk the talk, but don't walk the walk.
Mm-hmm.
They talk a good game. And what is this? What is this about language? So they know the definition of emotions, but they don't know what the feeling of emotions were. So we challenged them using brain imaging, which meant radioactive nucleotide going to the brain while they did a language test. Is this or is this not a word? The psychopaths and the normal subjects, everybody knew what the word was, but the psychopaths used more brain regions when it came to a negatively charged emotional word, like Hitler or maggot, bad words. So in other words, the normals, they didn't need much brain regions to do it. It was as if the normals were hardwired to understand emotional language, but the psychopaths needed more regions. So we hypothesized out of this research that emotional language for the psychopaths is like a learned language, like I'm learning French. I'm going to learn emotions. I can learn emotions by learning French.
Like a foreign language in a way, like listening
Exactly.
to listen to those tapes or whatever it is.
Exactly, which I think really kind of makes intuitive sense, because they know the words, they can talk the talk, as I've said, but they don't really get it on a deep level. And that's always been my interest. And as a psychiatrist, I'm a listener. Like you're a listener, you listen to people and you hear what they have to say, and you get a sense of whether there's depth with it, and you can start exploring how they feel, and to the depths with which they understand their own feelings or understand other people. Now, I don't do psychotherapy with psychopaths. Psychopaths belong behind bars. That's the best therapy for them.
I think you're with the majority on that one too. Yeah.
Exactly. But there's it's not like these things are categorical. People can become psychopathic like under specialized conditions. What is it like when your leaders are Nazis? What is it like when you're going to be reported by the person in your building for talking to someone you shouldn't talk to? When you're living under enormous fear, the way the Germans did under the Nazis. And remember, they just recovered from a horrible World War I. They were poverty stricken. The men had been brutalized by the war. They were very vulnerable people. This is something that over the years, I've become more empathic to the vulnerability of human beings under such distress. So people under specialized conditions can do things they wouldn't necessarily do when, in normal times. But I wondered if there was anything specific about these people who were influenced. And I found that there were people who are passive, who really look to somebody else to tell them what to do. And there are people like that. People like that. I know people like that.
Mhm.
They can be passive, or they can be very narcissistic, like I'm superior. It doesn't matter what the rules are. These are slippery, sliding ways into behaviors that they wouldn't necessarily do under normal circumstances. So that's kind of my contribution. So I go into this in my book to some degree as I listen to my lawyers talking to me, and I hear the word rumor. When I hear a rumor that the Nazi flag, I don't like the word rumor. I think it's kind of a cheap way of not telling the truth. You get away,
or like gossip, tabloid, or whatever you hear on social media too,
yes,
like tattle and all that. Yes.
I'm totally with you on that. Completely with you. So I heard the word rumor, and I started to dig in more deeply in my thinking, which is maybe when he said to me, there's no way you could find out about whether the people were Nazis, which is what I was told, whoever took the building, I thought might be Nazi, says, oh, there's no way you can find out. Well, that's not true. The lawyer found this, the investigator found this information within weeks of my hiring him.
Wow.
So there was information that, had I been a totally Germanly fluent person, had I been able to live there during this case, I might have been able to find out myself, but I had a full-time life in New York doing important things. So my detective got this information for me.
Mm-hmm. I also, a couple of things also came up as well too, that you talk about these various tests and everything, psychopaths that I don't know if you're familiar with the ink blot test, or was it Rorschach or something? It's like you have these ink blots, like say Rorschach, right. That's it. I was trying to think of the name. It's like these ink blots, and come up like it can be this, it can be this, and like
right.
Splattered all over. It's like isn't where the psychopaths just simply misinterpret it, or they just have advanced thinking? It's like those are generally tied into those.
I wish I knew the answer to that. I don't know what they've done with ink blots with psychopaths. I do know that that issues regarding language and how they, the tone with which they speak may be a little bit different. Hand movements may be different. That there are things that may be physiologically different between the true psychopath and everyday people. I'm no longer a specialist or expert in this. The field has gotten enormous. I can say, however, that my paper that was published in a top journal it has been quoted at least over 300 times over the years.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was groundbreaking.
Mhm. And also too, psychopath as well too has been branched off into sociopath as well too. And of course you've been in the field. Maybe you can give your interpretation of a sociopath as well too. Also being like an offshoot, and then thanks to
Absolutely.
social media, there could be another offshoot of a sociopath or anything else.
Well, I'll tell you what the word originally was sociopath, and that word came about like in the 1930s. There was a Dr. Birnbaum, I think it was his name. He came up with that word because he believed that social conditions like sociopath can make people bad guys. In other words, that bad guys were as a result of being poor and having no money. So that word sociopath came about. Psychopath emerged. It had been around in the 19th century, but psychopath reemerged through the work of Dr. Robert Hare, because these men and women could be, wealthy, they could be poor. It had nothing to do with social conditions. But you
Okay.
make a very interesting point about social media and its impact on people.
Mhm. Excuse me. And do you think psychopaths and sociopaths can also manipulate social media? And do you think social media encourages it, or are they trying to put a damper on it?
I think that's again a very good question. I think unfortunately young people are under the sway of this of social media, and in particular in combination with COVID, when kids were trapped at home, and and I think they're vulnerable to it, and they're vulnerable to bad guys entering the social media world. I don't think it makes psychopaths. I think it can and I don't know if psychopaths are running social media. I have no idea. I can't opine on that at all. But I do know these are kind of treacherous times,
Mhm.
and social media has gone a little bit too far. And I see the impact on some of my patients and on my patients' children, that it's been very, very difficult for them in combination with COVID, when they've been isolated at home, and that's what they're doing because their parents are trying to earn a living. So the kids are in front of social media. It's been a very bad combination.
Hmm. And certainly as well too, and of course, final thoughts on the book as well too, with Summon to Berlin, and of course, after the verdict with the building and everything else, and the building and everything else with Berlin, just update on it, and any final thoughts on the book.
Sure. Well, some incredible things happened after the case was over. A major museum exhibit occurred in Berlin, which I took part in, about this particular area. That was wonderful. And a plaque was placed on the building to show that this was where the Jewish Star band was manufactured. So a lot of attention was given to that. And over the years, I've been working on, I wanted to tell the story. Throughout the time that I went to Berlin, I took copious notes. Every meeting I went to, I took notes. And I started writing the book really like maybe in 2005, 2006. I think there are 6 drafts of it already.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I know it's hard to be a psychiatrist and to be an author and be a mother, but I did it all. And in any case, the book's going to come out not this year, but the summer of next year. And I've been doing some podcasts and talking and writing and trying to get a baseline of people interested in the book, and that's where I'm at with it right now. I'm very excited about it.
And certainly amazing too. Where can we find your book at?
Right now, it's at the publisher, and we're designing the cover, and I will be sure to make sure that where the book is at. You will get a copy of the book and all the information, and I would love the privilege of coming back and actually showing you the book and giving you the book. next year.
Absolutely. And we'll make a spot for you. And I'm going to mark it on the calendar as well, too. I get my
Yes,
secretary to do that. So,
I love that. That's great.
and what's coming up for Dr. Joanne Intrator with her works as well? We'll find out just 1 minute. You listen to the
Okay.
Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by SonicWeb Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Also brought to you by our official sponsor, the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's The Missing, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. We'll be back with the author of Summon to Berlin, Dr. Joanne Intrator, after this time out. We're back with author Dr. Joanne Intrator with Summon to Berlin, a memoir here on the Mike Wagner Show, and just a great story you covered as well too. Learned a lot about what's happened and everything else. And what else can you expect me in 2022 and beyond, Dr. Joanne?
Well, I'm really interested in taking care of my patients and working with them, and I find that extremely exciting. And I've built a great practice over the years, and I've been helping a lot of people through COVID and helping people through all sorts of issues. I want to continue writing. I've got a very interesting article coming out actually in Berlin, actually any day. I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Third Man with Orson Welles, one of the great movies. I've done a great story about that movie because he's the quintessential psychopath. So I'm writing that, and I have a few other things on the drawing board. So I imagine that for the rest of my life, I'll be publishing.
You mentioned Orson Welles too. The first thing comes is Rosebud.
Exactly. That was a great movie. But my favorite is The Third Man.
Certainly one of the best. I'll have to check it out, and I'm
Yes.
glad you remind me. So I have to go to Amazon Prime, Netflix, or anything like that.
Exactly, and you'll get it. And I'll send you the article.
Yes, definitely will do so. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
Biggest influence in my career. Whew. Well, I think all the different supervisors that I've had, that I've brought my cases to, and there have been many. Also, Dr. Robert Hare in Vancouver, who's an extraordinary man. And I think my father has always played a bit of a voice for me. And I go to him when I feel I need, encouragement. I go to him and talk to him. I know that may sound weird, but who knows? In any case, they've been wonderful mentors over the years that I'm grateful for.
And certainly amazing too. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
To try to be as grounded as they possibly can in their own life, to stand up and feel their legs, and their feet touching the ground, and to try to be as realistic about their situation, and to also try to maintain some hope, because it is a rough time.
And certainly is as well too. And we'll get through it. Once again, we're with author Dr. Joanne Intrator with Summon to Berlin, a memoir coming out soon on the Mike Wagner Show. Dr. Joanne, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot from you. Looking forward to having you again soon. Make sure you keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. And once again, tell us about your upcoming projects. What's your website? How do people contact? Where can people purchase or acquire or check out the soon-to-be book?
Right. You can find a lot of information on me with my name, JoanneIntrator.com. There's lots of information, and there'll be updates all the time. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, and probably on many more things in the next couple months.
We will certainly do so. Once again, Dr. Joanne, a very big thank you for your time. You've been totally amazing. Again, learned a lot from you. Looking forward to having you again soon. Make sure you keep us up to date, keep in touch. Love to have you back, and we definitely wish you all the best and a great future ahead of you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad.